What's up, everybody? Welcome to the weekly preview here on Rotogrinders with TJ and TheLuuch. What's up, TJ Laessig? How are you, man?
How we doing? Doing all right. Fresh off a super exciting Sunday night football game with the Eagles and just a high-powered shootout. That was a pretty ugly game overall, but another week of NFL DFS in the books. Guess we're pretty much at the halfway point now of the regular season, at least. And wasn't my personal best weekend. Got caught with Jimmy G in cash games, which is pretty much a guaranteed loss. Had some late swaps that I debated but decided not to go forward with. And so there it is. Not my best week. How about yourself? How you doing?
Hanging in, man. Sometimes we talked about it. You feel like you don't get paid when you have really good lineups, and there's no margin for error in DFS world. I cashed about half of my cash game teams. I also had Jimmy in cash, who was like 60% owned, and some double ups. It's crazy. You see these projected ownerships, and you kind of have to take them with a grain of salt. And the most popular plays are almost guaranteed to be even higher owned in most things. So, but how can these sites stick their neck out and predict, Garoppolo going for 80%, right? I mean, you kind of just can't. I get it. But yeah, so, those are two big injuries we'll talk about. The Niners just keep getting crushed this year. But I played two higher stakes, I guess, kind of tournament teams. You can call them two $200 single entry lineups on DK. I bubbled one of them. I played a Joe Burrow stack and ran it back with A.J. Brown and had a couple other pieces there. Had Dalvin Cook on it. Didn't cash. Ultra bummer. I knew I was playing two teams. I know I wanted Dalvin Cook exposure somewhere. So my problem was I know I also wanted Henry on one of the teams, TJ. So I ran my Bengals stack back with A.J. Brown because I thought I would get some leverage there like an idiot. And I should have stuck Henry there because the other team I ran finished 12th in the 200 SE on DK with 555 people. I think it was kind of like one of those later ads they opened up. 183 points. But I stuck Henry in there with my Mahomes Tyreek Hill team instead of Dalvin Cook. I also had Metcalf and correlated it back with Kendrick Bourne. So I'm hurting a little bit, you always one swap away. I know, famous last words, nobody cares, but I was close, man. But I made $600 and finished 12th out of 555, and the winner got $20K. Woo! Should have just played cash games, not worth the risk. But here we are. So kind of disappointed in myself, and the NFL just keeps proving to be wacky and gives us twists and turns. And yeah, Jimmy G and Kittle, TJ, what are your thoughts on that? And Mullins coming in.
Yeah. I mean, going into the week, I think that the San Francisco-Seattle game was one of the more popular games, and a lot of the talk throughout the industry in cash games was deciding between the two quarterbacks there, between Jimmy G and Russell Wilson, and just seemed like a great value spot. And, I mean, it really would have been, right, if Garoppolo didn't get hurt. I think Mullins came in and threw for like 200 yards or something toward the end in somewhat of garbage time trying to play catch-up. But, that's just the way it goes sometimes. And, yeah, there was a 3v3 swap where the lineup I had, and I think quite a few other people had, it was Garoppolo, it was Tyler Lockett, and there's a third person there. And then the other lineup had Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and Bourne. And so it was Keenan Allen versus Kendrick Bourne. So, yeah, there's like a 60-point difference in those two lineups. But I think that goes to show, as you're monitoring your lineups throughout the day, should always be thinking about late swap, considering your position and where you are relative to the field. It's something that I always think about, but I don't know if I pull the trigger on it enough, personally, if I'm being honest, right? I think that, you want to convince yourself that, okay, maybe I'm not off to a great start, but I'm still doing fine. And so I think that I'll personally be doing a little bit of reflection on that. And, maybe I was in more of a desperate situation than I thought I was. But, those folks that swapped off of, like a Lockett to a Metcalf, obviously really, really paid dividends with Metcalf having the big game.
We talked about how crazy it was that Tyler Lockett saw 20 targets last week, 2 weeks ago now, Metcalf saw a pedestrian 15 against the Niners. So guessing game. It's a guessing game, and their ownerships were close. I thought maybe we'd get a little bit more leverage on Metcalf, but he came in. I think he was maybe like 24, 25% in my single entries. Metcalf, that is. So not much there. Chris Carson did not play. And the news on the Niners side was Tevin Coleman was active for the first time. Was it the first time this season, or does the season feels like 8 seasons? I don't know. It's been a while for Tevin Coleman.
While, yeah.
Yeah, so he came back. So injury-wise, wasn't a ton of other action for once across the league. Not a lot of huge news to talk about, which is good because we've had way too much going on. And with the trade deadline Tuesday, there might even be some more cards shuffling around across the league. A couple big trades on Monday, but defensive side of things, the Titans getting Desmond King, thank God, help is on the way, and Quan Alexander going to New Orleans from the Niners, I believe that was too. So those are the 2 deals that I saw, and we'll see what else shakes out. But your Eagles getting a win's a win, TJ. A win's a win. Are they on bye next week?
You know what? I think they are.
I think they are. So maybe they need have a much needed bye. I feel like they're always hurt. Like, what's up with the nutrition personnel on the?
It's been like years of going through injuries, right? It's almost been happening for too long to call it being unlucky. Yeah, maybe they need to reevaluate their nutrition and their workout schedules because they can't quite seem to stay healthy. It's good to see Jalen Reagor back last night, though. Thought that he made a couple nice plays. We had Goddard back. So overall, obviously, the Eagles are not a very explosive team and not the most exciting team to watch as someone who has watched the majority of their games so far this season, but happen to have the right division placement for this season, as the NFC East is just a complete dumpster fire at this point. And I mean, Dallas looked horrible. I was joking before the show. It's like when you have to attempt to run double, triple reverses like 5 different times, I think you're clearly
reaching,
digging pretty deep into the playbook there. And it's like they wanted the ball to be in anyone's hands, but I don't remember that quarterback's name. He had a tough time. DeNucci, yeah.
DeNucci.
And then now we have 6,600 Zeke Elliott this week, and still don't want to play him. I mean, it's crazy, right? I never would have predicted that Zeke Elliott would be priced that low, and not only be priced that low, but I think that people aren't going to want to play him, and for good reason. There's just sure he got the ball plenty, but teams can easily just sell out to try and stop him on the ground against the Cowboys, and I just don't see that offense. It's a shame because they were one of the more fantasy-friendly offenses coming into the season, and now that's pretty much become irrelevant with not only Dak going down, but not even having a true NFL backup anymore.
Yeah, DeNucci, man, 21 of 40. If there's any takeaway from that game, I think he has a favorite receiver in Michael Gallup, who had 12 targets. Cooper had 5. CeeDee Lamb had 5. You're thinking, wow, that's a lot of pass attempts, 40. Well, they're probably going to continue to get the game script of throwing the ball, which doesn't bode well for Dallas and company. I'd be shocked if Jerry didn't unload a piece or 2 before the deadline. We'll see what happens. And he's stubborn, and they're America's team, right? And they got to put the best product out on the field. Well, I don't think there's much going on there. And we'll transition into next week. You want to talk about chalk defenses. Dallas is going to take on Pittsburgh. I knew there was one more deal, who just picked up Avery Williamson from the Jets today, I believe. I don't know if that's official yet, but I saw a bunch of tweets, and Avery Williamson was tweeting about it. So the rich get richer in Pittsburgh there. They're going to travel to Jerry's World to play a 4:00 game against Dallas. So I couldn't even put a finger on what the Pittsburgh Steelers ownership is going to be.
Priced all the way up at 4,900.
Oh, wow.
Pricing on DK at least.
Interesting.
So you got to pay for them. But I mean, you've got one of the elite defenses in the league going up against obviously one of the worst, if not the worst offense right now, just given the quarterback situation in Dallas.
For sure. And James Conner hasn't lit up the stat sheet, but he had a really bad week one. Then he had 23, 27, 15, 20, 14, 15 DK points. So I'm curious to see what his ownership is on a week where we have Chase Edmonds as a feature back. We have Dalvin Cook against Detroit, which we'll get to. It's going to be fun. And what a game that could have been if everybody was healthy, Steelers and Dallas. But unfortunately, I don't even have a line out on that game yet. We'll have to see what Vegas, and we're probably looking at a double-digit spread here, I'm assuming. If the Eagles were, 10.5-point favorites yesterday?
You might see a 2-touchdown type spread, I would think. But yeah, I don't have an opening line here either. But yeah, I mean, I think at the running back position this week, like you said, I think obviously Dalvin Cook had his massive game coming back from injury, going for 51 DK points this
51.
week. This week they get Detroit at home, who we know has been torn up a bit by some running backs. Yeah, I mean, I think that Dalvin is certainly going to be a play to look at. And you look at his games, other than the two he missed, he's been extremely consistent. I mean, he's getting tons of volume, 30, 17, 27, 22 carries, goes back even more than that. And he has 11 touchdowns?
Yeah.
11 touchdowns in 6 games. So, I mean, I think that Dalvin is going to be the premier pay-up option on this slate, $8,200. Plenty reasonable price that we can get him in. No Kamara on the slate. Derrick Henry, matchup against Chicago, not the greatest. I'm assuming prefer Dalvin Cook over Henry as the top play there. And then, yeah, anything else that you have to say on the Dalvin Cook front, or maybe this? I mean, this Minnesota-Detroit game could be a good one in general, right? We got a 53.5-point total. Like I said, Minnesota 4-point favorites, but I think that there's some mini game stack potential there. Although I think Dalvin's going to be my primary interest.
Agreed. 30 carries coming off an injury. Kirk Cousins only threw 14 passes. The weather threw some people off that game a little bit, at least in the passing game. You had Thielen and Jefferson coming in, I believe, at around 5%. And regardless, Aaron Rodgers just chugged along, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns. It's fine. Jamal Williams, one of the chalk options, 75 rushing yards, 6 catches for 27. He was fine for cash. E.J. Dillon tested positive for COVID. That's some more news we had. And as well, Devontae Adams, just 7 catches for 53 yards. 3 of them were touchdowns. Come on, man. Incredible. And he had 12 targets. So I think weather was a big key for a lot of people. It's the first week we really saw a lot of buzz about weather, and rightfully so. And we'll get to weather in a second because I want to talk about another game with another very chalky running back. Update I don't have is on Kenny Golladay, and I'm pretty sure he left the game Sunday, TJ, at some point.
Yes, that's correct. I believe that I saw he's going to be out this week. He's considered week to week.
So that's pretty big news. Poor Kenny Golladay, man. Guy's a monster.
He is not expected to play and is considered week to week.
He had 4 targets that game, obviously left at some point, and Detroit had a pass-heavy game script. You saw Hawkinson with 10 targets, Marvin Jones with 7. 3 catches and 2 touchdowns for Marvin Jones. Typical Marvin Jones game, 3 for 39 and 2 scored. Sounds about right. So, yeah, there could be some interest there and some usage bumps with these Lions guys for sure. How about Cleveland and the Raiders last week? The win was absolutely brutal. I don't know why I didn't pound the under when I saw the videos of the people walking into the stadium, and they couldn't even stand upright walking in. But Kareem Hunt was a big chalk option. He was damn near 80% in some double-ups on DK. Crazy. Him and Jamal were probably the 2 most popular cash plays on DK running back, right? Am I missing anybody?
Yep.
Henry was pretty popular,
definitely.
But not that high.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 2 most popular were Hunt and Jamal Williams. And then people tended to either pay up for Kamara or Henry as the third option to go along with this too. But so yeah, I mean, Hunt didn't have quite the usage that we would have expected. Looks like he was still out in the field a bunch. I'm seeing this correctly, 86% of the snaps, but only 14 carries, 3 targets, less than 10 DraftKings points. So pretty big bust there when it felt like going into the week that it was just such a slam dunk spot. And so, yeah, maybe the weather certainly plays a factor there. But I think Hunt definitely disappointed a lot of people with his performance this past weekend.
Do you know how many snaps that was? It just looks like, I'm curious, it looks like Oakland just controlled the clock, controlled the ball. Jacobs had 31 carries for 4.1 yards a pop. So, wow. I mean, they had 45 rushes.
42 snaps for Hunt.
That's pretty low for a team, right?
So, yeah, I think it's definitely on the lower end, especially, yeah. I mean, maybe just in general, Cleveland just didn't have the ball. Just a slow, sloppy game overall, which is, why we're always trying to find high pace, high scoring game environments, right? And I think that, maybe, I always struggle a bit with the weather because it's like, at what point is it just noise and it's not actually going to impact the game versus when do you truly determine that, okay, yes, this is enough to impact my decision making? And could have been obviously the smart move to come off of Hunt there. But I expect that as we get into these winter months that we'll hear more and more weather narratives stir up each week as we come into these games and start to get some of the colder weather, the wind. I think the wind is really what has the biggest impact, as we saw in that game.
Yeah, which is why I think Aaron Rodgers throwing for almost 300 yards in that Green Bay game was pretty impressive, and what a season he continues to have. It looks like the Browns are on bye this week, if I'm correct on that, but the Raiders are playing the Chargers on the road in a 54 total as of right now, and could be some points here. Could be some points. The Raiders love giving up points. Love it. They love it. I think they gave up – I'm willing to throw out last week's game against Cleveland, but I think they gave up 30 points in every other game this year so far. So are we going back to Justin Herbert? Is he going to be the chalk quarterback this week? 6,800 on DK. Kind of, there's, 5 or 6 guys priced higher than him? Maybe more. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. And, you talked about Herbert a little bit to me before the show, and he's been nothing short of phenomenal for a rookie. What are your thoughts on Herbert and the Chargers offense in this spot?
Yeah, I think it sets up really nicely. Like you said, tight total, high-paced game. Vegas just loves giving up points, and Herbert has shown that he's kind of that, has a little bit of that dual threat action, had another 21 yards rushing on the ground this week. So he's not to the level of some of the other folks that we've seen, but I think that he's very much in play here at 6,800. He gets pretty close in price to some of the other quarterbacks, but I mean, we're starting to also see people like Josh Allen, people like Lamar Jackson, not quite put out massive fantasy games like we have been projecting. So I think that's something to keep in consideration. And I mean, I think the real slam dunk is Keenan Allen. I just think that his usage and target share is so massive that he has such a high floor and a high ceiling to go along with it, that especially on DraftKings with the full PPR setup, I love Keenan Allen. Let's see, his last couple games, he got hurt one game. So we throw that one out. He's gotten 11, 13, 11, 19, 10 targets since Herbert took over as quarterback. So literally double-digit targets every single game for the most part, putting up, in the 20, 25, has the upside for 30 DraftKings points. So his price is at $7K on DK this week. So it's creeping up a little bit, but still, I think he's a pretty good deal there. And the person that I am most interested in on the Charger side of the ball. Granted, I'm sure he'll come with some ownership, but again, I think that floor that Keenan Allen has, he's almost like a Devontae Adams light in some ways, where he has as locked in of a target share and a volume as any receiver in the league.
Probably still one of the most underrated guys in football at the position. Like you said, Herbert loves him, crazy amounts of targets. Air yard market share, 31% this year for Allen. Mike Williams finally had a game last week. Touchdown, 90-some yards. 2 of the last 3 weeks, Mike Williams had 40+% of the air yards market share. Something to keep an eye on there. And I just think the biggest loser so far has been Hunter Henry. There's reasons to love him every week, especially with Herbert. The play calling's been better. They're passing more in downs they'd usually be trying to run the ball. But Hunter Henry just not producing. His ADOT is well under 7. Man, if this is right on our premium usage app, his ADOT in week 8 was 1.5. That's brutal. And he had like 7 or 8 targets, I think, or something like that. 4. I'm sorry, he had 4. My mistake.
Quite the ADOT right there.
But yeah, I mean, he hasn't had more. He hasn't had 90 yards in a game this year, not once. And he's one of those guys where until proven otherwise, I'm going to keep playing Keenan Allen and in smaller field stuff and cash games for sure. And he carried a lot of ownership and double ups this week too. And next week he probably will be, if everything stands as is, I would guess maybe the highest owned receiver in cash games with just a guessing and eyeballing. Yeah, slam dunk, Keenan Allen. So good start since Herbert's been taking over here. Love what I see there. So could be some good decent fantasy points there. At the 4 o'clock game. There's one more 4 o'clock game. We might as well cover it. Some really good ones this week. Tua is going to take on Kyler. And how about the Dolphins? What a weird game. The Dolphins defense broke the Millie Makers on both sites probably. I didn't check DK, but 20-something plus points. They were damn near min price. And just a big outlier. You don't see that production from a defense like that. And it just shows you the volatility of picking your defense, and some strategies are just kind of play whoever fits as long as it's not too ridiculous. So what do you think about Dolphins Cardinals, and what do you think about the Miami game against the Rams?
Yeah, like you said, it's always tough when a defense kind of breaks the slate early with the 2 touchdowns by Miami D. So definitely saw teams with Miami, especially on DraftKings, where the Miami D price just kind of made sense. I think they saw them at like 10 to 15% ownership in some tournaments there. So, I think that's also when we're picking defenses, right? I think it's the most unpredictable and volatile position. So it makes sense to try and get exposure to defenses that are maybe not going to be as high owned, because all it comes down to is those touchdowns or, a kick return, punt return type of thing. That's when you're really going to get big points on the board. So, yeah, that just kind of have to have the luck bounce your way with getting those different exposures. But yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see that the total on this one's only 48. I would have, if you would have asked me without looking, I would have assumed that Arizona Miami would be over 50. I think that this is the first time now that we have Arizona with no Kenyon Drake. So I expect Chase Edmonds to be highly talked about this week. It will be interesting to see and hear what their plan is, and if there's anyone else that's going to be mixing in for snaps in that backfield. But I think that Edmonds is a talented player. They like to involve him in the pass game. He's going to be getting the early down work now too. I think that sets up really nicely in a Chase Edmonds spot. And then, Kyler, of course, always in play, brings that rushing upside to the table. He's pretty much their goal line back a lot of the time as well, with some of those bootleg type runs that they like to run with him. So I think Kyler well in play. Edmonds, Hopkins, play all the Cardinals. I think that they're all strong plays almost any week, and I think that I don't mind this matchup here against Miami.
Lost in the sauce and Tua getting his first win here is the fact that he fumbled on the second play of the game, threw for a whopping 93 yards on 22 attempts, and didn't have any rushing yards. Well, I guess we need to see more. Some people thought the replacement might have been a little premature, taking Fitzpatrick away. So other people are saying Well, they had a plan when they drafted him, Let's see how it plays out. What are your initial thoughts after seeing what Sunday's performance was? And it wasn't much.
Yeah, I think it's almost too early to judge, like you said. Yeah, I was just pulling up the target numbers and was wondering how the numbers were so small. But Gaskin, 6 targets, Preston Williams, 5 targets. No one else had more than 2 targets. So it really was just an outlier game, I think, because of those defensive touchdowns. And then Miami was just kind of sitting on the ball, I guess, from there. Running in a bit with Myles Gaskin, had 18 attempts on the ground, went for 47 yards and a touchdown. So I think the Gaskin Miami defense stack worked out reasonably. Not a huge game for Gaskin, but yeah, I'll reserve my judgment on Tua to see what we have happen this coming week. But still a strange situation. I think that I was surprised with the Fitz benching to begin with, but yeah, we'll see how that goes, and if he's going to be positioned to be this quarterback of the future for Miami, or if they made a big mistake throwing the talent on Fitz too early.
Should be fun the rest of the way monitoring that situation. A quarterback who had a much better line was Patrick Mahomes, who threw for 5 touchdowns and 400 yards against the Jets. They had an incredible team total. I don't know why I didn't just play Mahomes on both of my teams. I was on him all week. Instead, I played stinking Joe Burrow against the stinking Tennessee Titans. But I'm glad I had one line with Mahomes. That was fun. In those games with a 19-point spread, you think, okay, well, they're going to have a game script. They're going to run the ball kind of thing. Oh, Edwards-Helaire had 6 carries. 6 carries. And this was kind of a close game up until halftime, then they blew it open. So you think, okay, if Edwards-Helaire's not going to get the work in the second half, it's going to be Le'Veon Bell. Oh, Le'Veon Bell revenge game. Better offense, 6 carries for Le'Veon Bell. They ran the ball 12 times. They scored over 30 points, and it was a lopsided game in the second half. But some of these drives didn't last long. A lot of big plays. Tyreek had 2 scores. I know one was pretty much a bomb. So if you played the leverage there and took Helaire, who was projected under 5%, I don't know what he actually came in at, you lost, because for the second week in a row you got nothing out of that backfield there, which is kind of another bizarre way the game kind of unfolded there. But Mahomes, after doing nothing the previous week, in a weird game where they won by a lot, he just absolutely dismantled Adam Gase and the New York Jets.
Yep. And you look at a lot of the winning tournament teams from this past weekend, and it was Mahomes stacks and a lot of triple stacks of Mahomes, Tyreek, and Kelsey in the same lineup, which is obviously a very expensive stack. But the reason that people were able to do that was because then they would run it back with 1 and sometimes 2 of the Jets receivers in Denzel Mims and Braxton Berrios, who were both, I think, 3,200 and 3,500. So you could see how that became a reasonable thing to play Mahomes, Kelsey, Tyreek at somewhat inflated prices, but then be able to run it back cheaper on the other side. And I mean, it was a smart move, and not many people played the Chiefs. I think, like you said, we all had this assumption of, okay, it's a 20-point line. The Chiefs are just going to be content to run the ball and take their victory, but they really had a breakout performance, and now they sit 10.5-point favorites over Carolina this weekend. But I think it sets up well again as another nice game stack. We've been talking about Carolina pretty much all year. Obviously, they have some appealing run back options, whether it be Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Mike Davis, assuming that McCaffrey is still not going to be out. So I think that Kansas City stacks are very much going to be in play again this weekend.
Agreed. And with the lack of production you saw from the run game the last 2 weeks, you could probably still get Edwards-Helaire in a great matchup with the Dalvin Cook performance and Chase Edmonds being relevant at a decent price, and James Conner, in a high team total, most likely in a favorable matchup. Edwards-Helaire down to 6,100. Good Lord. But yeah, you nailed it. And my DK team that fared well, I had Mahomes at 8%, $200 SE with Tyreek at 16%. And I had two one-offs on that team. So I ran it back with Berrios to get some leverage off of Mims there. Didn't really work out for me. I mean, the thought was there he had 8 catches, only 34 yards though. And like I said, I correlated that, with a little Chiefs two-man game there. I had Henry with the Titans D correlation, which didn't work out for me because I had more points than the Titans D, who had -1 against the Bengals. Yeah, I'll take the L there. I just thought with an entire new offensive line for Cincinnati that maybe Jadeveon Clowney, maybe Vic Beasley, maybe Jonathan Simmons could do something, and it didn't happen. But yeah, the Chiefs remained very low owned. I was shocked when I checked out the ownership projections kind of midweek last week, like going into Thursday, and I saw how low they were. Granted, on FanDuel, Mahomes was a little more popular, even though he was a little more expensive. He was like 9,200, I believe. But I was like, man, I got to try and go overweight there. And you could be really right in DFS and still be wrong and lose money. I play $154 lineups on FanDuel. And we won't even get into the debacle before lock at 12:30 Eastern on FanDuel. We won't even get into it.
Every week there's something now.
We
it's
won't
crazy.
even get into it because I don't want to get fired. So I had 75 Mahomes teams, and I was overweight on Dalvin Cook. And I had enough Devontae Adams. And, I obviously had a lot of Tyreek and a ton of Kelsey, but I just didn't have enough Miami D, and rightfully so. Just couldn't, had the stack set up. And if you get on over to the Rotogrinders, guys, you want to spit out multiple lineups, there's no better tool in the industry than using Lineup HQ. You can really, really dive into the weeds and tell the optimizer what you want, build different kinds of stacks, from certain games and what percentages you want, a full stack. And if you want to run it back with nobody or run it back with one guy and what position you want it to be, it's amazing. It's amazing. And you put a little bit of time into it and take some tips from the RG team, and it's really going to help you out. But, I made a lot of calls, was way overweight on Dalvin Cook. Just, if you don't finish in the top, 2-3% in anything, you're not going to get a sick ROI. And when you're playing against 600,000 entries, the Dolphins can be 1% owned, and do the math. With 1% of 600,000, you're still going up against a ton of teams that have the Dolphins defense. So it's hard. The millie is what it is, and if you play large field GPPs, you got to be absolutely perfect. But yeah, the Chiefs continue to do the thing, and I guess the news we're going to have to wait and see on is: are we going to finally see Christian McCaffrey, TJ?
Yeah, it seems like it's definitely possible, right? It's a little up in the air still. It says they're hopeful that'll be activated from the IR. So I think there's going to first be a guessing game on whether or not he's playing, and then if he is, it's going to be a guessing game on does he step right back into full Christian McCaffrey, or do they have some sort of split between him and Mike Davis? And I personally do not know enough right now to say one way or the other. I know that coach just come out and said that Mike Davis is going to still have a role. So my personal assumption is that maybe McCaffrey comes back in more of a limited capacity, or at least like some sort of 50-50 split. But I think that there's no way to know for sure until we see it on the field. Coach speak can sometimes you might just get yourself into trouble trying to read too much into it.
Jaguars Texans 51.5 total as of right now. Houston's favored by 6.5. Gardner Minshew will not play. Instead, we have Oregon State rookie Jake Luton. Are we saying Luton or Luton? Are we Luton or Luton? Tomato. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
But he's 4,900 on DK. So, I mean, he'll carry some ownership, right? Some people are gonna play him. Some people are like, wow, he's 4,900, let's throw him in. But definitely worth noting. And the Texans coming off a bye, so maybe there's like that lull of absolutely no recency bias in a great matchup. Texans defense, rookie quarterback if he starts, interesting. Brandon Cook's still, 5,500 on DK. Curious to see the ownerships here on the Houston guys, on the Houston potential stacks here. They could be They typically are in play for GPPs, right? Every week we're pretty much bringing them up to some capacity. But, nobody's talking about them coming off a bye. A lot of other news floating around the league and popular plays coming about. So maybe the Texans might be a little underowned. We'll see.
Yeah, could definitely see that. I think that people will be less likely to want to stack the game just because of the quarterback situation on the Jacksonville side. So I think that could drive down ownership on the Texan guys a bit. And to me, the Watson Fuller or Watson Cooks or Watson and Fuller and Cooks is a stack that is viable on any given week. I also think that David Johnson could potentially be an interesting play this week. He's had the role so far this season, and I mean, he hasn't been bad. He's actually shown a pretty solid floor in terms of, looking at his game log, 17, 14, 12, 11, 12. Like, it's not like he's out there putting up 5 points, but he hasn't shown much of any upside yet. So maybe can attribute that to touchdown variance a bit. But, I mean, he's pretty much getting 15 to 20 carries and 2 to 4 targets every week, which is not a bad role for 5,600 on DK and a pretty good matchup here against Jacksonville. So at first glance, I kind of like a David Johnson Houston defense stack potentially.
Yeah. Oh, you'll get some good ownership on David Johnson most likely too. That's a nice GPP call there. Another thing we have to monitor, which shouldn't happen Sunday, but is Calvin Ridley going to be healthy? No one really knows yet. Atlanta's taking on Denver. 50 total for the game. Falcons are 4-point favorites at home. Herbert just put up 30-plus on Denver. I'm curious what the public perception is of the Broncos' defense. Now, they've been consistently pretty tough the last couple of years, and they're just so injury-ridden that maybe people are just seeing that, the Broncos I don't want to stack against the Broncos. But if we're going to see even more of a condensed target share, if Ridley's out, I mean, what's Julio's ownership going to be? I don't know. But I'm going to have some pretty significant interest if Ridley's out and we're getting Julio Jones at home with Matt Ryan. So just wanted to point that out there. And that's some pretty serious news we'll have to monitor heading into Sunday. Also, Hayden Hurst his snaps have been up the last 4 weeks now, and I don't know what they were doing with him the first couple of weeks of the year, and people said, why did we sign him? Why did they sign him? This and that, the other thing. But he is a significant part of this offense now. So if you want to get contrarian, I could maybe endorse sign off on a Matt Ryan, Hayden Hurst, Julio type of situation here if Ridley's out. So I haven't heard anything. TJ, got anything on that game or anything on Ridley, or what are your thoughts with what to do with that one?
Yeah, it seems like we're not going to know until a little bit later in the week on Ridley. Still day to day at the moment, so we'll wait on that news. But yeah, like you said, I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, Julio seems to be back. I mean, I think that it was a little quick to – I don't think anyone was really considering him washed by any means. But last 3 weeks, 10, 9, and 10 targets, 8, 7 catches, went over 100 yards in, 2 of the games. So 97 yards in the other one. So, I mean, Julio's doing Julio things. And if Ridley is out, I think that only boosts his market share. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting week to see who kind of shakes out as the popular wide receiver plays here, because you've got Julio, Tyreek, Keenan Allen, all kind of sitting right there, all in reasonable enough matchups and game environments. So it could be my guess is that in tournaments that it's not too heavily slanted ownership wise to one of those guys, just with so many pretty solid options at a similar price. But definitely like Julio, and I like the Hayden Hurst call too. I mean, especially now with Kittle out, like we've been talking about a weak tight end pool of players all season, and now you've lost the 1A tight end in George Kittle. So it's just going to continue to be ugly. Obviously, we do have Travis Kelce on the slate at tight end this week, but we're always looking for for value tight ends, and Hurst at 4,100 is a nice little call there. I like that.
Speaking of game environment, you got one more guy there, Stephon Diggs in that range, who hasn't seen any less than 7 targets since week 3. John Brown, come back from COVID a couple weeks ago, still hasn't really done anything. What do you do with Josh Allen? I mean, Seattle's the worst pass defense in the league in many statistical areas. I know he was your MVP futures bet in the first couple of weeks of the year, 300 yards, 400 yards, 300 yards, 288 against the Raiders. So he played the Jets, the Dolphins, the Raiders, and the Rams. He lit up the Rams too, which is strange. And then since then, though, weeks 5, 6, 7, 8, he has 4 touchdowns and 4 picks. Titans, Chiefs, Jets, New England. Doesn't score against the Jets. Nothing. No touchdowns. He had a rushing touchdown against New England. What's going on here? Did we jump the gun on Josh Allen? What's happening? Is he good? Is Josh Allen good? I'm so confused with Josh Allen, and I'm so confused with what his ownership's going to be from week to week. And now he gets Seattle. So, what are you doing here?
It's a good question whether or not Josh Allen is good. I was very convinced that he was good after the first 3-4 weeks. Now it's maybe he is what we thought he was, in that he's obviously very good when he's running the ball, but maybe not so good throwing the ball. But I like this spot a lot this week in tournaments for Josh Allen stacks. I think that Seattle continues to get eaten up every single week. I was looking at I don't have the number off my head, but when I was writing my GPP article last week, I think it was the games with Seattle are averaging 65 points every week. It was something outrageous. And obviously Seattle's going to put up their points. I really, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and John Brown's all the way down at 4,600 now. Now, granted, like you said, he had the whole COVID thing, hasn't done much of anything since, but for larger field tournaments, 4,600 John Brown is super, super cheap if you want to go with an Allen and Diggs and Brown kind of stack, and then run it back with one of the Seattle receivers. But Josh Allen's always still going to have that floor and upside from the rushing, right? Even these past couple of weeks, he's still 10, 11 attempts, still gotten to the end zone once on the ground. So I think that he'll come in at pretty low ownership would be my guess, especially when people can just pay $600 more and get Russ in that same game. But I like Allen Diggs stacks, and I think they'll come in at pretty low ownership this week.
I'm with you. Recency bias works in many ways, and this could be one of them. And if Josh Allen's just carving bad defenses and not playing well against good ones, well, you got a pretty bad one. Got a pretty bad one right here. Pretty bad defense, pass defense right in front of you in this current week. So definitely worth a look there. I definitely wanted them to mention Diggs, regardless of what you play. Yep. I think he's in play. And it should be interesting. Definitely look at that news. Is Matt Milano going to play? Is Tre'Davious White going to play? On the Bills side of the ball defensively, just some other things to monitor. So that game totals 54, 2.5-point spread. Seahawks traveling across the country to come east. Could be an interesting game. We got 8 or 10 minutes left here. So we've covered a lot of games. So we may actually be able to get through this slate for the most part. Ravens, Colts, I won't have a ton of interest here, but Mark Ingram missed Sunday. We saw J.K. Dobbins, who is most likely going to be the future of this backfield, you would think. 113 yards against the Steelers. Pretty nice kind of entrance party for J.K. Dobbins, TJ.
Yeah, definitely. He'll be someone to keep an eye on. Baltimore's been an interesting team for me this year because they don't seem to be producing from a fantasy standpoint the way that we were expecting or that we're accustomed to. I saw something about Marquise Brown being frustrated with his role. Obviously, Lamar Jackson's not putting up the numbers that he was putting up last year. But, yeah, J.K. Dobbins a little bit of a bright spot there, going for over 100 yards. So someone to keep an eye on there. And then I think Uh, on the other side of the ball, had some funky stuff going on with the Colts backfield. Every time you saw someone scoring, it was
Not Jonathan Taylor.
It was not Jonathan Taylor. Taylor only played. I'm pulling up the snaps here. Here we go. 51% of the snaps for Jordan Wilkins.
Ugh.
34% for Taylor. 21% for Hines. So I don't know what happened. I don't know. I did not see that coming. I thought that Taylor had been showing. I mean, he was literally increasing his snap count every single week. Then they go on a bye, and then they come back, and he has the least snaps he's seen all season long. So I think that backfield is just going to be one to avoid for the most part. And I think in general, I don't have the most love for this Baltimore-Indy game. I think there's better spots to look towards this week in general.
And now Taylor's hurt. I didn't bring it up in the beginning of the show. I don't know.
Oh, is that why he didn't play? Did he get hurt?
I don't know the extent of it, but after the game, Frank Reich said he has a quote bit of an ankle
injury.
See
that.
So even with the higher volume for Wilkins or maybe Hines, that's a tough matchup. So Hines is a guy who might have been in a couple Millie teams somewhere who broke the slate potentially. A guy who was on nobody's radar, shouldn't be at this point. He had that week 1 blow-up game. But since then, he only had double-digit DK points once. So naturally, he had 3 catches. 2 of them were for touchdowns because that's the way DFS football works sometimes. Marvin Jones had 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. Nyheim Hines had 2 touchdowns on 3 catches. Devontae Adams had 3 touchdowns on 5 catches. So you want to talk about, volatility and variance. Sometimes you don't know who's crossing the line. And I know Giovanni Bernard was a pretty popular play again, and he got vultured at the 1 by LaMichael Pirine against the Titans. So it's just the name of the game sometimes, who comes in and vultures the scores or who makes the most of a handful of volume that they get. And that's the brutal nature of DFS football. A couple minutes left here. We have the Giants and the football team, but since the Giants don't play until Monday night, who knows what could happen by then. We don't really want to get too much into that. So keep tuned to the Rotogrinders team throughout the rest of the week, and they'll update you on everything. Our premium stuff is amazing. Check it out, including TJ's GPP article right up every week. One more game, which might be the last one, is saving the best for last. Chicago Bears and the Tennessee Titans. And I will tell you this. If Desmond King doesn't come to the team, and I know he pretty much plays the slot, by Sunday with COVID and testing, I don't know if he'll be active. And if Adoree Jackson is still out, I will be playing Allen Robinson everywhere, anywhere and everywhere, whatever I can do. Props, whatever I can find Allen Robinson, I'm playing him, because if I have to see one more week of Chris Jackson and Jonathan Joseph, I'm going to gouge my eyes out. And look at the pass charts. Look what Roethlisberger did. Everything was outside the numbers. Deontay Johnson, even Juju had a game. Everything outside, quick throws. It's terrible. So Allen Robinson can clear concussion protocol, came in at a really nice ownership against the Saints, had a pretty nice game. And as long as Adoree Jackson's out, I like Allen Robinson, and I can't see him being like uber popular. So that's just my big takeaway from that game I wanted to bring up. And I am a Titans fan, and I am telling you to push the Allen Robinson button this week. What are your thoughts?
I like it. Great call outs on the matchup there. Doesn't take a lot to convince me to play Allen Robinson, just because I think he's good, and I think that he's one of those guys that has a pretty locked in target share with the Bears. So I'm all for that. And I mean, this is another one. Like, will this be one of those weeks where large field GPPs, big dog Derrick Henry's like under 10% owned? So if you want to get, in some larger field stuff, I think that Henry can score 35 points against anyone, regardless of matchup. So if in larger field stuff, if you want to pivot off of a Dalvin Cook onto a Derrick Henry, I think that is certainly viable to do.
I think you make a good point. It's definitely possible. And I mean, you get in the red zone, the guy's getting looks too. That's the thing. Like, he's one of the guarantees. We're going to try to get him in the end zone because he's hard to stop kind of guys that are left in the NFL. So,
Yeah,
good
like
call.
they'll just give him the ball no matter what. It doesn't really seem to matter. Like Derrick Henry's touching the ball 25 times every single week, I think.
One of the only teams that runs the Wildcat once in a while for him. Remember when the Wildcat came in the league and the Browns were so bad that they're like, Josh Cribbs, you're just going to start taking snaps and just running with the football. And for like 3 years, the Wildcat was like ran probably by every team at least once a week to some capacity. That was gone. Like,
That was a quick fad.
Quick fad. Anything else, TJ, before we get out of here? Anything you want to bring up or anything we didn't cover? Let me hear it, man. What do you got? Anything good?
I think we touched on the majority of it. I think this is a pretty interesting slate coming up. A lot of games where it's pretty evenly matched teams with some higher totals. So I think that, again, continue with the game stacks. Showed again this week. Game stacks are what we're taking down GPPs for some folks. So and late swap. Keep late swap in mind. Like I said, I'm going to be doing some internal reflection on late swap and how I can make sure that I'm making the most of that in my personal games that I'm playing. But just thought that this week was a good reminder that that's an aspect of DFS that maybe we all aren't taking the most advantage of, right? It's nice to set your lineup and then sit down at 1 o'clock and just watch the games. But if we really want to be maximizing our chances, we need to always be considering late swaps based on how our guys are doing so far, based on ownership percentage we've seen, based on how other guys' teams are doing. So I think we kind of started with that, and I'll finish with that too, is that late swap is a key part of the daily fantasy game that doesn't get probably as much attention, myself included, as it should.
Especially for NFL. For sport like NBA, it's a necessity. And there was a point
that's true.
There was a point in time where FanDuel was not running a late slot for NBA, and everybody said, we're not playing because NBA is crazy with news. And some people just think NFL, lock in your line, let it rip, have a fun Sunday. If you start off bad, you're kind of screwed, but that's not always the case. Like you said, you can swap to a 2% guy in the 4 o'clock game that goes for 50, which sounds crazy, but this might be the first time, and I don't even know when. I'd like to see the numbers somewhere on Twitter land where we had back-to-back weeks with a 50-point score that wasn't a quarterback. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's yeah, I mean, and then if you just don't have those guys in your lineup, like obviously you're not
forget it.
You're not going to win a tournament. So
forget it.
And that's why I think it's really, as you're building tournament lineups, I'm really trying to identify guys that have that crazy type of ceiling, because like you said, in today's NFL, that is obviously a very much more offensively focused NFL, whether it's because of the teams, the coachings, or the rule changes, whatever it may be. More points are being scored, and we need to do what we can to try and identify these spots where people can just break out and completely, be a must-have on a given slate.
Good stuff, TJ. As always, I appreciate it. Where can the people find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at TJL5124DFS. GPP article will be dropping again on Friday. You can check that out as well. Obviously don't have a 100% hit rate on the GPPs, but I do feel like I've had someone. I read up 6 guys every week, and I feel like I've always had at least one person. Like I had the DK Metcalf play this week. Now, granted, I also had Jonathan Taylor, which is a complete bust. So, but I think it's worth, taking a look at and understanding that it's not a lock that all 6 of those are going to be smash plays. But like I said, I try to identify those guys I think can have the mega ceilings, and hopefully I get some right again this week.
Good stuff. Hey, hit the subscribe button. Give us a like. Give us some feedback on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. We appreciate it. We want to hear some of your input. What do you want to hear? DM us some questions for next week's podcast. We'll be happy to answer them. For TJ Laessig and the rest of the Rotogrinders team, I'm Justin Carlucci. Good luck and have a good week.